Welcome to part 3 of the FocalRig tutorial series. Last time we made a character aim, shoot, and reload a rifle. In this video, we'll make it possible to switch to unarmed or a pistol, and make it easy to add new weapons. Let's turn BP weapon into an abstract base class with different subclasses for the different weapons. So let's make a child blueprint called BP weapon rifle and move it under here. Now let's open both of them. And move the rifle mesh from the base class into the subclass. So only the subclass knows anything about rifles. And let's make the base class abstract so that you can't spawn an instance of it. Now in our third person character, instead of just spawning BP weapon, which is no longer possible, we're going to be spawning different weapons and removing old ones when we switch. So let's extract all this into a function called equip. Let's give it an input parameter which takes a subclass of BP weapon called weapon class, and let's say BP weapon rifle. And here we're gonna do two things. First, we're gonna remove whatever weapon we already have. So we're gonna take the weapon, check if it's valid, and destroy it if it is. And we're going to reset the variable back to null. And then, if we were given a valid class, so because if you give it null, it should not spawn anything. If we're given a valid class, which is gonna spawn that one, I've prepared a few input actions for weapon switching. So when you scroll the mouse up and down, you get a number that is positive or negative depending on where you're scrolling. And when you press 1, 2, or 3 on the keyboard, you get a number 1, 2, and 3 and an event. And we're going to use that to handle weapon switching. So when you press 1, you select nothing. When you press 2, you select the pistol. When you press 3, you select the rifle. And when you scroll up and down, it switches between them. Now, in our character blueprint, let's implement weapon switching. So we're going to add the input action for scrolling the weapons. Let's move this further up. And the input action for selecting a weapon directly. Now, instead of doing this on begin play, we're going to have an array of BP weapon subclasses for the different inventory slots. So it's class and an array. We're going to call it weapon classes. And the first one's going to be nothing, the second one's going to be the pistol, but we don't have that yet, and the third one is going to be the rifle, which we do have. And then we're going to have a weapon index, which is going to be just a single integer. That's going to be the index of the currently selected slot. So whenever we scroll or select, we need to change that index and then pick a weapon to equip based on that. So we're going to be equipping a weapon class based on the index. So when we scroll, we just round the input, which is going to be -1 or 1, depending on which way you're scrolling. And we're going to add that to the weapon index. And we're going to wrap that around the number of elements in the weapon classes. So that if you go over the limit, it rolls around, and the same if you go below 0. And we're going to set the weapon index. And similarly, when we directly select the weapon, we round it, we subtract 1, so that 1, 2, 3 turns into 0, 1, 2. We check if the weapon index isn't already what we selected. And if it is, then again we're going to set the weapon index to that. And equip it. Now if you hit play, you'll see that the mouse wheel now enables and disables the rifle, and so do the 1, 2, 3 buttons on the keyboard. But the animation blueprint still thinks you're always holding a rifle no matter what. Let's fix that. We're going to use animation layers, so each weapon will have its own ABP that slots into the main ABP of the character when we equip that weapon. So let's add a variable called animLayer class that's going to be an anim instance class. Now in our character, let's add an event for whenever the weapon changes. So go to event dispatchers, call it onEquipped weapon changed, and let it have a parameter of type BP weapon. Let's call this new weapon and call it over here like that with the new weapon. Now in our ABP, let's subscribe to this event. So that whenever the weapon we have equipped changes, we also change the anim layer. So we get the anim layer class. First we check if the weapon is valid, because if it isn't, we need to unlink everything. Let's put this into a variable called weapon layer class. And then if it's valid, we link the anim instance like so. And when it's not, we unlink what it was before. So when the weapon is null, we switch back to unarmed. Now let's define what the weapon ABPs will actually contribute to the main ABP. Let's define an animation layer interface called ALI weapon that those ABPs will implement. And we're going to give it one animation layer called weapon, and it's going to have one input pose, it's called inpose, and it's going to take a variable called aim target, and that's going to be the vector we feed into it. Now let's make an ABP for the rifle. So go animation blueprint, pick the same skeleton as the character, call it ABP weapon rifle, and then in the weapon blueprint, assign that as the anim layer class. Now let's make this new ABP implement the ALI weapon interface we just created. So we go into the class settings and add ALI weapon here, which created an animation layer here. Now here in the preview, we get to drag and drop that in as a node. And just for the sake of preview, let's set it up like this with a reference pose. Now whatever we do inside this layer, we'll be able to preview here without having to add it to the main ABP yet. Just like the main ABP, the weapon ABP will need access to the character. So let's copy this part into here and add the appropriate variable. In the main ABP, we have this whole part for holding the rifle, reloading it, and aiming it. I'm going to take all of this and copy it into the weapon layer of the weapon ABP. And instead of a get aim control function, we're going to use the aim target input. Now you see that the character is aiming straight down. That's because in the preview, it takes a default value of 0 for the aim target. So we can expose that as a pin and give it a nice default value for the preview. Might have to reload it for that to take effect. There's one more thing. In order for this montage slot to actually work, we need to go into class defaults and enable use main instance montage evaluation data. That way, when you tell it to do a reload animation, that will actually be propagated from the main instance down to the weapon instance into this slot. The weapon ABP currently uses the same control rig as the main ABP. Let's make it so each weapon has its own separate control rig. Let's just copy this one under rifle and call it CR character rifle and assign that one here. Now let's make the weapon ABP actually contribute to the main ABP. First, we get rid of all this for aiming the weapon, and we make it implement the ALI weapon interface. And now that created a layer here that can be used as a node like this, to which we're gonna hook up aim control. And we're gonna put the control rig inside the default implementation of this. This way, if we don't have any anim layers linked because we don't have any weapon, this is the graph that will be executed with the control rig CR character. And let's go in there and also remove everything to do with aiming the weapon as well. So we're only going to keep aim chain for aiming the head and the spine. And we're going to remove these variables here, which were being fed from the ABP. So we're going to delete these and we're going to refresh the node. If you see a character aiming down after this instead of forwards, you just need to reload the ABP. Now if we hit play, we'll see that the character doesn't have the weapon yet. And when we switch to it by pressing 3 or scrolling, we'll see that it makes a switch to it. But it's very abrupt because we haven't set up any blending between the anim layers yet. Let's fix that. In the main ABP, after the linked anim layer, just add an inertialization node. And then go into animation layers and on the weapon configure the blend in and out times. Let's say 0.1 and 0.2. And similarly on the weapon ABP. Let's say 0.2 and 0.1. So now when we hit play and we switch between the weapons, we see some nice transitions between the layers. Now let's add another weapon. Let's add a pistol. First we'll go into the skeletal mesh and change the preview from a rifle to a pistol. Remove all attached assets and then add another one. Now let's duplicate the weapon blueprint and call it BP weapon pistol. And in our third person character, assign that to the list of weapon classes. Now let's open our new pistol blueprint and change some settings. We'll reduce the amount of ammo to 7. We'll change the delay between shots to 0.5 so it shoots less often. We're going to change the reloading montage to the pistol reload montage. And of course, we're going to change the skeletal mesh to the pistol. Now let's reload it. And now we see the pistol. And let's make sure that in the base class, nothing that's specific to the weapons is assigned. For example, the reload montage needs to be clear, so that it is assigned only in the subclasses. Now let's make an ABP for the pistol, just duplicating the rifle one. Let's call it ABP weapon pistol, and we'll assign it to the pistol here. Now let's open this ABP and change the weapon holding animation to the one for the pistol. So instead of MF rifle idle ADS, we'll use MF pistol idle ADS. And of course, let's give it a control rig of its own. Duplicate the one from the rifle, call it CR character pistol, and we'll assign it to this ABP. Now in this control rig, let's put the muzzle in the right spot. First, we'll change the preview pose to use the pistol holding animation. And then we'll move the muzzle. Now we connect it like this. We'll see that the muzzle is in the correct spot, but the weapon depenetration still thinks the stock is over here. So let's go and fix that. Like so. And for the aim down sights case, let's make sure that the iron sights are in the right spot. And one more thing, you'll notice that the character is holding the pistol too far away from the body, stretching the arms. That's because we still have the minimum distance to pivot really large from the rifle. Let's put that back to a smaller value. Now the pose matches the animation. Now when you press play, you see that when you press 2, it switches to a pistol, when you press 3, it switches to a rifle, and when you press 1, it goes unarmed, and mouse wheel scrolls through them. Adding a new weapon now takes less than 10 minutes, and for each one, you only need 2 animations. One for holding it, and one for reloading it. Project files are linked below.